Hey guys, Mr. Hyatt here. This is the Chapter 8 AP Environmental Science lecture. Obviously, we're talking about sustaining biodiversity in this unit, and in this chapter, we focus on how do we focus on ecosystems? How do we fix ecosystems and then take care of the species that are within that ecosystem? So we start off with a look at Costa Rica. We've talked about them several times. They're a great example of how you can maintain biodiversity in today's world. You see here on the slide that there was a ton of natural capital degradation. Essentially, there were some really powerful ranching families that, like I said, they were powerful, so they set up a system in which there were incentives for deforesting and converting forest land into usable ranch land. Sounds good, except for the fact that you're tearing down a whole bunch of trees, destroying microclimates and ecosystems and things along those lines. Notice that there are 500,000 plant and animal species in Costa Rica, which is essentially the size of West Virginia. 500,000 different plant and animal species in a country roughly the size of West Virginia. That's a lot. They've got a system of land reserves that includes more than 25% of the nation's land. And there's one park in Costa Rica that has more variety of species of birds than all of North America. So it's a really, really biodiverse place that has been maintained because there are government policies in place. So think about this question here: how can governments meet people's needs while protecting ecosystems and wildlife? That's the real key to this course. How do we strike that balance? How do we sustainably manage our ecosystems so that we still get something out of it and there's still something for our future? Notice here there's a program where the government pays landowners to plant trees, pays landowners not to use their ground to maintain the biodiversity and things along those lines. 8.1 focuses on forestry. So we're going to look at how forests can better be managed. Forests cover a third of the land area, so we better take good care of it. It's a third of what what covers our planet. So they do provide important ecosystem services, as you guys know. They store carbon dioxide, support energy flow. They absolutely aid in nutrient cycling. You guys can read all of those. Now that we have a little bit of better idea of what the ecosystems and ecosystem services and economic services are, that response to that last free response question on our last test should be a lot better, right? Like now we've got a little bit more information. We won't just say it provides a habitat for animals, which is what most of us said. We'll be able to say things like store carbon dioxide. We'll be able to say things like, yes, of course there's wood for fuel, lumber, and wood products, but also think about pulp for paper. Think about the fact that there are mines in forests as well. Recreation and jobs are kind of economic services that flow in there as well. But when we talk about forests, there's really three different kinds of forests. Let's start at the bottom and we'll start at the bottom and jump around a little bit. So tree plantations are going to be like a Christmas tree farm. It's a managed farm. There's only one or two species. They're essentially all the same age. The Christmas tree farm I go to has 8 different pastures, and in each different pasture, the trees are the same age. So they've got, 6 or 7 different species that they'll plant maybe 50 of per year. And then the next year they plant the next, whatever their pasture land is. Old growth forests, back at the top here, those are going to be really undisturbed natural forests that have basically been left alone for about 200 years or more. Second growth forest results from secondary succession. That's good. There's a tie back to a previous unit. So primary forest has been destroyed within the last 200 years and the forest is growing back. Maybe that's forest fire, maybe that's deforestation, don't know. This is kind of a model of a tree plantation. I mentioned that the Christmas tree farm that I go to, they stagger their fields so that they don't have all mature trees just in one year. They've got mature trees to sell every single year. So there tends to be, depending on what the species is, there tends to be a 25 to 30 year cycle, or if it's Christmas trees, it's an 8-year cycle. But it's definitely a cycle of planting, maturing, growing. So, of course, fires are going to impact forest structure. A couple of different types of fire. Surface fire is going to essentially just burn the stuff on the ground. It's going to burn undergrowth. It's going to burn up all the leaf litter, all the dried things that are on the ground. It's going to kill seedlings and small trees, but big trees and wildlife are going to survive because it's a ground fire. It's on the surface of the earth. Absolutely can be beneficial. A lot of times we'll intentionally set these to control and to kind of clear out the brush. For sure, burns away flammable material, prevents a natural forest fire. It's going to free up nutrients that are being held in those reservoirs of living organisms. It's going to release some seeds. Some seeds need fire to unwrap the shell and for the seed to grow. So that's going to happen when we do a prescribed burn. Definitely help control destructive insects because you're destroying eggs and insects themselves. And tree disease because you're going to limit smaller trees and you're going to destroy insects. A crown fire is sort of what we see on the news when we see a forest fire. That's where it's engulfing the whole forest. Going to kill wildlife in that scenario. Going to mess up some buildings. It's going to be rough. But not all fires are bad. Prescribed burns can be a really good thing. You guys know a little bit about this. Actually, you know a decent amount about how we harvest trees. So there's really 3 types of harvesting trees. Selective cutting is going to be, I'm going to walk through the forest and I'm looking for maple trees that are going to give me boards that are 17 feet long. So I'm walking through, okay, this tree will work, this tree will work, this tree will work. I'm cutting down 6 trees total and I'm getting what I need out of it. That's selective cutting. I'm selecting the trees that I want to cut. Or maybe I'm just selecting the mature trees that are boards over 20 feet. Or something along those lines. Either way, I'm picking and choosing what I'm cutting and what I'm leaving. Contrast that to clear cutting. Clear cutting, you're going to take a buzz saw and you're going to cut down a whole forest. Or maybe a half of a forest. But you're cutting down everything in the way. Of course that's going to be efficient because you just get buzz saws and you cut down everything. It's not very costly because you got one dude on a machine that's got a saw blade on it and he drives through, and then you've got maybe 5 or 6 people that come in and scoop up the logs and put them onto trucks, and it's just not very costly because you're efficient. You're opening up a lot of space, transportation is easy, and all that kind of thing. But of course it's going to harm the ecosystem. We're going to have lots of erosion. We're going to lose our carbon reservoirs. We're going to lose some of those ecosystem services. And really it's going to affect erosion. And in strip cutting, let me just talk from the picture on strip cutting. What we tend to do in strip cutting is, well, we're going to cut a strip. But that tends to be along a road line. Not necessarily, but we're essentially trying to hybridize these two. Yes, we need trees to prevent erosion. We need carbon reservoirs. We need ecosystem services. But we also need wood. So we're going to cheaply go through and clear cut just a strip. We're not taking down the whole forest. We're taking down just a strip. Obviously not as good as selective cutting, not as bad as clear cutting. So deforestation impacts of that, you see them listed down here, has eliminated almost 50% of all forests in the last 8,000 years. Man, half our forests are gone globally. There's our definition there at the top: temporary or permanent removal of large areas of forest for agriculture, settlements, and other uses. So that's kind of a key distinction. It's not deforestation if you cut and then reseed. It is deforestation if you deforest it. If you just reforest it, then you haven't deforested. It might seem like I'm splitting hairs here, but the impacts are different. If you're getting rid of trees, then you're going to have lots of erosion. You're not going to have those tree roots to hold the water. You're not going to have the trees themselves to suck up a bunch of water, so you're going to have more water available. You're going to see more flooding. Definitely you're going to lose local specialist species. If those are endemic, you're talking about losing that species all around. You're talking about extinction. Of course, we're losing our ecosystem services. If you're tearing those trees down and then reseeding them, then you're going to get all these things back. Now, it's kind of a gray area. What's temporary mean? If we're talking about Christmas trees that regrow in 8 years, that's not deforestation. If we're talking about oaks, or we're talking about big big trees in California, sequoia trees, that may take 200-300 years for that forest to regrow itself. So kind of some semantics here. Tropical forests are especially vulnerable to deforestation. At least half of mature tropical forests have been lost since 1950, which is, we've lost half the world's known species homes. 2000 to 2013, more than 50 soccer fields of forest were lost every minute. And we've made some progress on deforestation. Like we're getting there on it. Like we've had some success, and we're still losing 50 soccer fields per minute. That's a crazy amount of forest disappearing. We got to be better. It's especially taking place in Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America, tropical places. So why is it disproportionately affecting tropical places? Well, there's population growth. There's lots of poverty in tropical countries. Government subsidies for large-scale logging and ranching encourage deforestation. And then depending on the country, of course, it's going to be different. In Africa, they need lots of firewood for fuel, and then they need to farm, so they need nutrient-rich soil. In Indonesia and Southeast Asia, they're growing oil palm. So there's a bigger product out there, basically. And in South America, they're grazing cattle and they're raising crops. So different pressures in different countries. So how does deforestation specifically affect rainforests? Well, you see that cycle there. Build roads to cut down trees, sell the land to ranchers. They're going to slash and burn for grazing. Then the ranchers are going to sell the land to farmers and settlers, and that land then becomes useless because you've sapped all the nutrients out of it. The effects, we're going to for sure destroy biodiversity, reduce rainfall, leads to drier conditions because we have less transpiration happening. We've got topsoil erosion increasing, and then, of course, these ecosystem services of carbon dioxide removal and all that kind of stuff. So, how can we manage them more sustainably? We need to recognize the value of ecosystem services. I've seen several attempts to put math behind the amount of carbon dioxide that trees take out of the atmosphere, and the numbers just make your head hurt. It's an astronomical amount of money we would have to pay to remove the amount of carbon that trees do for free. So if we recognize the economic value of those ecosystem services, we have to shift our priorities. We have to shift our government subsidies and things along those lines towards ways that will promote more trees, not fewer trees. Of course, if we use selective cutting rather than clear cutting, that's going to help. Like I said, get rid of those subsidies and tax breaks that favor deforestation. Look for ways to increase government subsidies that are going to favor reforesting, like that kind of talks about here and here. Economic rewards for sustainable forestry. Maybe you subsidize logging companies that do selective cutting. You don't subsidize logging companies that clear cut, something like those lines. If you purchase certified lumber or wood when you buy wood, you can buy wood that's certified sustainable. It tends to be a little bit more expensive. I tend to pay the extra $1, extra $2 for that piece of wood because I'm an environmental science person. That matters to me. So for me, I'll spend a little bit extra money if I know that my impact on the planet is shrinking. We could manage forest fires better. That would be a big way to improve the efficiency of our forests. If we do prescribed burns to remove small trees and underbrush, like those surface fires that we talked about, that's going to reduce natural forest fires, and that's going to reduce the number of big fires that we see where they consume the whole forest. Allow fires on public land to burn as long as they don't threaten human life or structures. So you can have a fire in a park as long as you're being safe with it. Have thin trees and vegetation around buildings because a lot of times a fire is going to start in a house and then spread to a woods, something along those lines. Eliminate the use of wood shingles and siding in construction.